curse to the cross, how Christ restored marriage. Hidden battle. Welcome back. Family, today we need to talk and have a real transparent conversation. A conversation about relationships, about marriage, and about the silent battle that happens in so many homes. Have you ever wondered why marriage can feel like a battlefield? Why two people who love each other deeply can end up in constant friction, a subtle tug of war for control, or feelings of resentment, misunderstanding, and emotional distance. We often think the friction in our relationship is just about money or schedules or difference in personalities. But if we open the Word of God, you discover that this struggle didn't start with you. It didn't start with your generation. It goes all the way back to the very beginning, to the Garden of Eden. And today, we're going to look at the root of that tension. And more importantly, how Jesus Christ completely redeems and heals it. Unpacking the curse, Genesis 3:16. Let's go back to Genesis chapter 3. Before the fall, and Adam and Eve walked in pure harmony. There was no competition, no manipulation, no insecurities, no domination. They were one flesh, perfect in completeness to one another. Complete trust, complete unity. Then sin entered the world. And when sin entered, it broke our relationships with God. And it broke our relationship with each other. In Genesis chapter 3, verse 16, God speaks to the woman after the fall. Listen carefully to what he says. Your desire shall be for your husband, and he shall rule over you. Let's pause right there. For centuries, people have read that phrase, your desire shall be for your husband, and assumed it meant romantic affection or physical attraction. But that doesn't make sense in that context of the curse. To understand what God is and why he's describing, we have to look at the original Hebrew word used here. It's teshkwa. The Hebrew clue, teshkwa. The word teshkwa only appears 3 times in the entire Bible. The Old Testament and the clearest definition comes from just one chapter. Later in Genesis chapter 4, verse 7, God is speaking to Cain. And he warns him, sin is crouching at your door. Its desire is for you, but you must rule over it. Notice that the exact same phrase, its desire is for you, but you must rule over it. Sin's desire for Cain was not affection. It was an urge to overpower him, to conquer him, to master and control him. So, when God tells Eve in Genesis 3:16 that her desire will be for her husband, he is exposing a consequence of the fall. A broken impulse where the woman may struggle with a desire to control, to manage, or to contend with her husband's leadership out of fear and self-protection. And what was the man's falling response? And he shall rule over you. The Hebrew word, this is mashal. It means to dominate, to govern harshly, to assert power by force or emotion or emotional detachment. Do you see the cycle? The fall introduces a toxic dynamic, a struggle for control on one side, and a heavy-handed domination or withdrawal on the other. It turns partners into competitors. It turns the home into a struggle for authority. The danger of misunderstanding. Now, hear me clearly on this point. Genesis 3:16 is not God's design for marriage. It is a description of the curse. God was not saying, this is how I want you to live. He was diagnosing a disease of sin. He was saying, because sin has broken your heart, this is the friction and distortion you will face. And for thousands of years, society have lived out this broken pattern. Men abusing authority through harshness, neglect, or tyranny. Women living in self-defense, manipulation, or quiet resentment. Neither side feeling truly safe, cherished, or respected. If the story ended in Genesis 3, every marriage would be doomed to that cycle. But God had a redemption plan. Christ inverted the pattern of Ephesians 5 that brings us to the New Testament. The Apostle Paul reveals how Jesus stepped directly into the broken cycle and turned it completely upside down. Before Paul addresses husbands or wives individually, he establishes the foundation in verse 21. Submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. Right out of the gate, mutual humility replaces the pride of Genesis 3. Then Paul addresses wives in verses 22. Wives, submit to your own husband as to the Lord. In biblical context, this is not forced or subjugation. It is not being a doormat. It is a voluntary posture of trust, honor, and partnership. It is saying, I choose to lay down the urge to contend, control, or manage you because my ultimate security rests in the Lord. Then Paul turns to the men in verse 25. And he drops a standard that completely destroys the falling rule. Husband, love your wives just as Christ loves the church. And he gave himself up for her. Think about that for a moment. Paul doesn't tell the husband to rule over his wife. he tells him to die to her. He commands him to lead by laying down his life. Nourishing and cherishing and serving. How did Jesus lead the church? Did he dominate? Did he exploit? Did he rule with an iron fist? No. He washed feet. He carried the cross. He gave up his comfort so that his bride could flourish. Paul goes on in verse 29 to say that a husband must nourish and cherish his wife, just as Christ does the church. To nourish means to provide what helps her grow spiritually, emotionally, and personally. To cherish means to hold her in the highest honor with warmth, gentleness, and a deep care. When a husband leads like Jesus, he creates an environment of total emotional and spiritual safety. When a man loves his wife sacrificially, protects her dignity, and put her well-being ahead of his own ego, the wife no longer feels the need to fight for control to protect herself. The tension of Genesis 3:16 dissolves. The struggle of the Teshuvah meets the self-control, self-given grace of agape. The return to Genesis 2. Look at what Paul does at the end of Ephesians 5 and verse 31. He doesn't quote the curse of Genesis 3. He quotes Genesis 2 and 24. For this reason, a man shall leave his father and mother and become joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. Do you see what Jesus did? Christ didn't just come to forgive our personal sins. He came to restore God's original blueprint. Takes us past the brokenness of the fall and points us straight back to the garden of innocence and unity. One flesh, one team, united under the grace and lordship of Jesus Christ. Practical application and closing. So what does this mean for you today? If you are a husband, ask yourself honestly, am I leading with sacrificial love, or am I demanding my own way? Does my wife feel safe, nourished, and cherished under my care? Lead by serving, lead by listening, lead by putting her first. If you are a wife, ask yourself honestly, am I building trust and honor in my home? Or am I operating out of fear and trying to control the narrative? Surrender that anxiety to the Lord and choose honor, respect, and grace. And if you're single or preparing for marriage, know the standard. Don't settle for a relationship built on power or struggles of Genesis 3. Look for a covenant built on the cross of Christ. When both people submit to Jesus, the battle for control ends and real peace begins. Thank you for tuning in today. If this message blessed you, share it with someone who needs to hear it, who needs encouragement in their relationship. Stay grounded in the Word. Walk in love. And I'll see you next time on Watch Your Step.